Hello everyone, welcome back. So today I want to talk to you guys about the effect that I think that these mass federal layoffs are going to have on reducing prices across the board. Okay, so for those of you guys that don't know, I am an accountant. Okay, I spent many years doing accounting work. My last position was that of a chief financial officer for an import-export company. Okay, I pretty much stopped doing that full-time about 10 years ago, primarily because it's a lot more fun to be here shooting guns, okay, and training people to shoot guns. But I do have, like I said, a background in finance and accounting. So one of the things that I said many years ago, if you go back to some old videos, right, is that recessions are, don't just happen, they are engineered, okay? And the reason why they are engineered is to bring down the prices, to basically reset the value of the dollar, okay? So traditionally, the way I think it's worked ever since the Clinton years, okay, is that any president, right, coming into office would like to engineer a recession in his first year, right, so that he has basically 3 years after that to bring back the economy, and then he can get himself reelected into a second term. Okay, so that's the pattern that I had seen, because I think people has kind of wisened up to this, to the way Americans generally think. Because if you engineer a recession in your first year, you can basically blame it on the president before you. So Trump broke that pattern in his first term, okay, which was very surprising, and I think a lot of that had to do with him just not being a politician, right? Not knowing how things, are supposed to be done. So I was very surprised with that, and my gut feeling was that, by the time he got into the fourth year of his first term, he was going to run into some serious inflation. Okay, but then what happened in his first term, right? In that fourth year, you had the whole COVID hoax. Okay, which completely just threw a monkey wrench into, I think, the tradition, the normal pattern. And I really had no idea how that was going to land. What ended up happening is that and again, that pandemic, I think, was engineered by the Democrats to basically give him a bad fourth year, okay, so that he couldn't win re-election. So in a sense, there was the economics were engineered. The thing that kind of, again, threw a monkey wrench into that was the pandemic checks that they were sending out, right? Because now you really didn't have, because there was so much money floating around, right? Because of all this money that they were printing, not just the stimulus checks, but also people receiving unemployment, extended unemployments. I mean, again, it was just something that was different, unexpected. It ended up causing more inflation. And then when Biden came into office, inflation went into overdrive. So basically, we had 4 years of that, and then Trump now has inherited this, this highly inflationary economy, with like eggs being like $8 a dozen. The price of like cars and trucks being like stupid. I mean, like just like a base pickup truck now, you got to pay like $70,000 for that. All this stuff is insane. So we're back to what I was originally saying. If you want to bring down prices, right? How do you motivate businesses to lower their prices, right? They have to have the real fear of a recession so that they can lower their prices. Because, I mean, as a businessman myself, right, I prefer higher margins. It reduces my risk. In fact, what I was advising during the inflationary period was, hey, raise your prices. And you know what? It doesn't matter if you don't sell your product this month. The price is going to be higher next month and the month after that and 6 months from now. So selling your product in the future is going to be more profitable than selling it now. Okay, that's what the general advice I was giving to people that had inventories. Okay, so where we are now, Trump has inherited basically a highly inflationary market, right? And not that it's continuing, it's just that the prices have carried forward. So how do you reduce that, right? So the traditional way is, okay, great, you raise interest rates, which basically the result of that usually is businesses stop borrowing, they stop spending money. Ultimately, they start laying off people, right? Because they foresee less business, so they don't need so many people. So what happens is you got two companies here, let's say, right? So this company fires its people, and this company fires its people. So the people from this company end up going to this company. The people from this company end up going to that company. So you have an employee swap, okay? And then the people that are hired, they're hired at a reduced salary, right? So you get, let's say, like a 20% reduction, or 25, 30% reduction, okay? So you've got people making less money, so basically prices tend to go down, right? Because people have less money to spend, they haggle more, so it tends to put a downward pressure on prices. The problem with this is that you end up with a lot of people that are not happy. Okay, so Trump, there was an indication when he was running in 2024 that wasn't the model that he was going to follow. Because he was asked, how are you going to get prices down? And what his idea was that he was going to basically flood the market, or motivate oil companies to flood the market with so much oil and fuel and gasoline and diesel that the price was going to come down. Okay, and what he was going to do is he was going to offset the high price of everything with cheap fuel, right? And I've thought about that, and I said, okay, I think that can kind of work. You'd have to get the price of fuel down pretty low, like well below, $2 per gallon, right, for gasoline, in order for that to kind of work. And I said, there's a possibility for this to happen. Okay, so here we are now. We're in February of 2025, and the price of gasoline has come down a little bit, but not a whole lot. Okay, so I'm like, okay, that doesn't seem like it's working. But what I think is working, and I don't know if he had planned it, or it's just like the natural, just it was already part of his plan to try and just make government smaller. But these mass layoffs that he's doing from within the federal government, it's essentially having that same effect, right? You got all these employees that are being fired, right? And here's the interesting thing about this that I think is really working out for the better. It's basically limited to the federal government. Okay, so what Trump has done is he's created a recession, or even more, a depression within the federal government, right? That is going to put downward pressure on prices without having too much of an effect in the private sector, right? Because the way it works is that, it's very rare for private companies to hire federal people, because there's just a different culture, different mindset. From the perspective of private companies, they looked at government employees as being lazy. Whether that's true or not doesn't matter. That's the perspective that I have, having worked for private corporations for many years. Usually when you get a resume and somebody's like, let's say from coming out of government trying to get into a private corporation, you kind of put that to the side, and not necessarily because you think that they're lazy, but because they're coming from a completely different culture, right? A work culture, an ethics culture, just completely different, and you just don't think that they're going to fit in well with the people that you already have, working for you, right? So you tend to throw those resumes aside. So firing all these federal workers does not have an immediate impact on the on the private sector. Okay, it just doesn't, right? There might be some effect. Now, the exception to this is like the only time where I see if you got somebody that's at a high level position in the government, right? And what happens is a lot of companies will hire that person, right? But the only reason why they're doing that is because they think that that person that's in a high level inside the government has a lot of influence in the government. Okay, so they're essentially hiring that person into a private corporation at a high level because of the influence that they think that they'll have, that they can now have inside the government. Okay, but that's like kind of the exception, and it applies to just so few people that it's just not relative to, you know, to the overall discussion here about what's, you know, about the price of you know, the price of goods and the cost of living. Okay, so let's take that out for a second and just look at, you got all these federal employees that are being fired out of the federal government, and what's going to happen is, because private corporations generally you know, question their work ethic, or their ability to work well within private corporations. I mean, it's not that they won't hire them; they will hire them, but they're going to get hired at very low positions. Okay, so these people are not going to be competing with people at the intermediate level inside of corporations. They're coming in basically at the entry level, which essentially means, like, you know, if they're coming in at the entry level, it's assumed that you know, it's just like if you're hiring somebody at a high school or something, right? You need to teach them work ethics. You need to teach them what's expected of them. Okay, so it doesn't matter if they're coming from a different culture, or, you know, different work culture, or different work ethics culture. You know, if they're going in at the entry level, they're going to be trained. Okay, they're going to be retrained. Okay, so I think that is either by design or just the way things are working out. I think that these mass federal layoffs are going to have a very good effect as far as bringing the price of things down, right? Because they've created unemployment, right? Which is what I think is necessary to bring the price of things down, but it's very limited to unemployment in the federal government. Okay, so yeah, I think this is genius. This is not something that I had considered or contemplated, but this is the way I think it's going to work. Now, the other good thing about this is that all these federal employees that are being fired, a lot of them, let's say, being fired out of let's say Washington D.C., a lot of them work in like a lot of them work in Washington D.C., but they live in like Northern Virginia. Okay, and they have shifted Virginia from what would be a red state into a purple state. So these people are eventually going to move out of Northern Virginia, and they're going to go back to like either Baltimore or New York City or somewhere in New Jersey. So it's going to turn Virginia into a hard red state. And I think the same thing is going to happen in places like Colorado, because I'm sure they've got federal workers in Colorado. Colorado is a place that has been shifting blue, right? And if you get these mass federal layoffs, eventually these people are going to move to California, right? And then Colorado is going to become, you know, is going to go from being blue to purple, and then hopefully to red. Okay, so I just wanted to share those ideas with you guys. And I think that this is very interesting, the way this is working out, because in my opinion, as an accountant, having been through many recessions, it's like I don't think that you can actually reduce the prices without having a recession. I think one is dependent on the other. But I think what Trump has done here is he's been able to isolate that recession to the government side. Okay, so he's going to create a recession on the federal government side, but that's not going to affect the private sector so much, other than prices coming down. So we'll see how it works out. This is kind of like me. You know, again, obviously, this is like all new stuff. Like, I don't think it's ever happened before on such a wide scale. So, you know, it's kind of like, you know, look back and see what happens. But I just wanted to give you guys that idea of like kind of like what to look for, right? And if it turns out I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But this is, I think, the thing to be watching for as far as the price. You know, as far as, you know, the cost of living going down. Okay, so drop some comments. Talk to you all soon.